Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of Livewire. I am your host, Jared Moore, and Livewire is the program where we take your questions from the chat. Tonight, we're joined with Mvskoke Creek Nation National Council representative for Creek District CA, Dode Barnett, and we are going to be talking about $500 teacher grants that the application process is open for since we're going into back to school time. So, Dode, thanks for joining us tonight. I really appreciate it.
Well, thank you for featuring the grant. This is the first year that we're doing it, and so I am excited to let everyone know it's available and answer any questions they might have.
And if you guys do have a question, pop it into the YouTube chat there and we'll try to get it asked. To start off with, so if you're a teacher, this is for Creek teachers, Mvskoke teachers, right? What do they need to do to start the process because they have to apply for these grants, is that correct?
Yes, sir. So we rearranged some of the charitable donations money that used to be available that since 2019 has not been available. We looked at what funding we had available and we said, how can we help? So these $500 grants were created for Mvskoke certified teachers on the reservation in public schools. If you go to our website, and I noticed that you had linked it in the description
Yes.
for Livewire. So the link is in the description of this Livewire, guys. If you want to click on it, it'll take you to the Mvskoke Nation National Council website, and the application is there. We tried to make it relatively straightforward where it was not difficult or a headache for teachers to navigate this, but there is a little bit of paperwork to do, right? So you would need to provide your citizenship card, your teaching certificate to make sure that you're a certified teacher. And that goes for temporary certified teachers as well. If you didn't have a 4-year degree and that's how you got certified, but you're a emergency certified teacher, you still can apply for this grant. That's absolutely encouraged and acceptable. And we tried to make the funding kind of open ended because we weren't exactly sure. I know every district has different needs. So some teachers might need basic things, right? Like a bookshelf or a decent chair to sit in, and other teachers that have more of those fundamental things provided by their district might want it for fun things like classroom decorations or games that your kids can play or books for a reading corner or something like that.
Right.
So it's very open-ended what you can, but that's part of the application process is to provide a budget narrative for what you're going to spend the money on. Once those and your administration, so whether it's your superintendent, your principal, your administrative office, they'll need to sign off on it. Similar to the school clothing applications, when you
Mm-hmm.
get a school application, the school has to stamp it and say, yes, the student is enrolled here and we know who this person is. So same thing, your district will stamp it for you. You'll apply with that, all of those things, and everything's in there. There's a checklist of all of the documentation that you'll need to finish out the application. Um, and there's a little bit of demographic information that we're hoping to capture with this process as well. It was very interesting to me that when we were trying to structure this grant and get it stood up, I contacted the OSDE to see how many certified Mvskoke teachers that we might have. And my brain thought, okay, let's just start with how many certified, Native American teachers do we have in the state
Mm-hmm.
of Oklahoma? And OSD said, we don't know because they don't keep track of it. So it
Right.
was an interesting learning process. That demographic information on the application process will also help better inform our education department on how many teachers we have on the reservation, what they teach, what grades they teach, where they teach on the reservation. So I'm really excited to see the applications. I know we've already got a few that have already been submitted, but I'm really excited to see what kind of smarty pants teachers we have that are helping our kids reach their educational goals.
Absolutely. And also, so when the teachers apply, they turn their stuff in, and then let's say they get approved. what is the window of time there before they actually see the $500? And do they have to do any reporting after that? Like, do they have to turn receipts in or anything like that?
Wonderful questions. And again, this is also spelled out on the website when you go to the application. So we are taking applications from July 1st to July 31st. At the end of business, July 31st, the application will be closed, will be taken down, and all of those applications will be reviewed by the Health, Education, and Welfare Committee. So the HUE committee will meet, they'll look at the applications. All of the ones that get approved will be sent to the controller's office. The controller's office will then run a batch of checks, and based on the information given, your mailing address, obviously, then those checks will go out at that point. So the turnaround time for the controller's office, I mean, they're busy folks and it's going to be smack dab in the middle of budget season. But we're hoping it'll only be maybe about the middle of August before those checks go out.
Okay.
Can we know how many applications that we have?
Mm-hmm.
Because again, how many teachers we have for certain. We estimated we might have somewhere between 200 and 250. So depending on how many checks that they have to run, I'm imagining that turnaround time will be somewhere a week or two, and then you have mailing time. So we're hoping that those checks will be received, by the middle of August, maybe the end of August at the latest.
Awesome. So it's just not a scenario where they're going to get it in the middle of the semester. They should get it pretty close to the start of the semester.
Yes, they will get it pretty close to the start of the semester because we're only doing one batch. So all the
Okay.
applications will be reviewed, all the applications will be sent to the controller's office, and then they'll do one batch of checks and they'll all go out at the same time. So it's not like the school. We thought about how do we structure this, and I had discussions with the controller, and we asked what is the best practice that you guys want us to utilize, and they suggested a one-time application period and then having all those checks go out at the same time. We thought about doing a spring semester and a fall semester, but again, this is our first time. It's a learning process.
Right.
Maybe if we don't have as many applications as we think we're going to have, maybe it can be a more open-ended process, or maybe if we just get inundated, possibly, there are more teachers than we think there are. I would love to give away all the funding. I would be elated if we ran out of funding. I mean, not for the ones that get rejected if that happened, but just to know that there were that many teachers out there. I would be absolutely thrilled to give every single penny of this money away.
And it's in, guys, if you want to see the amount that of funding that's for this, it's in the legislation. But how much money has been allocated for these grants?
So we set aside, I have to put my readers on here. Set aside $125,000 for these $500 grants. In the original legislation that authorized the council to give to charitable organizations. So originally, when this law was implemented, we had different buckets. You had like nonprofit organizations, right? 501(c)(3)s, that sort of thing. So the history of this money comes from, and where the amount is tied to, is we tried to stay original to that legislation. The amounts of money that were in that legislation that were set aside every year, we tried not to go outside of that. So then we didn't have to go looking for money, because this money was always dedicated. We had a moratorium on charitable giving since the casino flooded back in 2019. So even before COVID, this was the pre-COVID thing. Before COVID, we knew we were probably going to be short on money that year because of the flood, and they stopped all charitable giving. So the amounts that we were giving to schools, the previous amount was actually $165,000, but some of that funding we took and we funded other things. If you look at the legislation, we funded on an annual basis from now on Indigenous Peoples Day celebration in Okmulgee. That was one of the things we funded. And we also funded the NACOA conference, which is every other year. It's a conference that elders go to every other year. And it's now established, so they don't have to come back every time they need that money. So it's just going to be an automatic part of the CAB. That $125,000, the way that it was implemented before, was that each school district on the reservation could come and ask for up to $5,000 at a time. And not every school district came to ask for that money. And it's a good thing because $165,000 would not have covered it if they had.
Mm-hmm.
What I noticed historically, whenever I was on council before, is that when they came for the money, although the money wasn't tied to sports, it just was tied to, hey, you're a school, you can apply for $5,000. A lot of the schools that came and applied for the money used it for sports, and I'm not against sports, but I really, especially post COVID, especially in this just really rocky time in our state for education, I wanted to be able to, and I wasn't the only one, by the way. Okay, so I say I, but there were a team of us. Robin Whitecloud and Thomasine Yehola Osborne also helped with this legislation, and there are other parts of it that will be coming later. But we looked at that. We met with our council secretary, we met with staff. I talked with school administrators, I talked with teachers. And one of the things that we really wanted to do was impact educational outcomes in the classroom on our reservation.
Mm-hmm.
And money really, when I talked to some of those older legislators back in the day, they said, we were trying to just help kids, education parity, help them compete, help them be equal, help that school district serve our own people. And whenever I talked to some educators on the reservation, it was interesting because they said, well, if you really want to help students, give it to teachers.
Right.
And I, well, yeah, heck yeah, because one of the things I noticed with the way we used to do it, okay, so let's say a school district knew about the $5,000. Well, then I noticed sometimes even within the internal politics of a school district, it was a competitive thing for this department as opposed to this department to get that $5,000, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so this way, we know we're helping not only encourage our Mvskoke certified teachers, but we're also just getting dollars straight into the classroom with very little red tape. And I'm super proud that the council as a whole approved of this. And I'm really excited to see the applications whenever Hugh starts. I'm not on the health education and welfare, but I told him, I'm happy to help, or I'm happy to come look, because I'm super excited to see what the needs are, right? How we can
Yeah,
help our teachers,
absolutely.
kids.
So we've talked about how to apply for it and how much money's been set aside for the grants, and that this is kind of, an experiment to see how much need there is. Um, what do you think is, well, you mentioned a moment ago there's going to be some more stuff related to this come out, more legislation. Is there anything that you could talk about on that front while we're talking about this?
So the other part of the funding that used to be set aside, it won't be earmarked for education like this grant is set up, but it will be we're trying to figure out what are the needs and what does charitable giving look like now? Because the way the grant used to be administrated, a lot of the things that citizens would come and ask for help with are now programs. So
Mm-hmm.
I was very first on council years ago, back in 2012, 2013, 2014, we would get people coming to ask to help pay for baseball camp, or we would get folks coming to say, hey, I am in college and I have to study or abroad, I need some money. We would get, Muskogee citizens, or sometimes not even citizens, that had nonprofit organizations that the nation felt like we needed to fund. And those nonprofit organizations were eligible for anywhere from $2,000 to $5,000 every single year if they just came and asked for it. But the way we advertised the grant, we didn't really advertise it. There were some people, I'll be honest with you, they asked me to sponsor legislation, and I just didn't think it would be something I would vote for. So I said no. But
Mm-hmm.
if another legislator that didn't mind sponsoring it, it just wasn't fair, right? There was a lot of inconsistency. It wasn't well advertised. And I never thought that it was very fair. So there was a time where we really worked to stand programs. Grants that exist now came out of the history of this grant, where
Mm-hmm.
we just, what youth services knows what you young people need, not the council. Let's give them a bucket of money to give to our young people when they need it for those extracurricular or educational things that would make sense under that grant. The education department now has wonderful programs that they didn't have back whenever these funds initially were set up, right?
Mm-hmm.
Have higher education grants that go past just a 4-year degree. We even helped George Alexander go to Italy to study for 2 years in that master artist program, right? So there's all kinds of wonderful things that exist now that didn't used to exist when this legislation was made. And that's what we're looking at. So those funds won't be earmarked for education, but they will be, we'll be looking at what does charitable giving look like. And it's just, it's very overwhelming to kind of overhaul this legislation that's probably about 30 years old.
Yes, and with this legislation, even this was a long process to work out all the kinks and address all of the councilman's concerns with the legislation. If you guys go and check out our national council coverage, you'll see that this bill went up and down and through every type of it's been reviewed, heavily reviewed. So I don't see any questions popping up in the chat. If you guys have any questions, feel free, stick them in there, and we'll try to get them asked. Is there anything about these grants that we haven't talked about that you think is important to mention, Dode?
So one of the things that this year, our Department of Education, under Dr. Kayla Harjo, they had a teacher's grant as well. And some people asked me, that was one of the questions, if you followed the committee coverage, is what makes this grant different from the teacher's grant we're already doing. One thing that I'm very proud of and that our team worked really hard to accomplish with this grant is that we have absorbed that administrative cost, if you will, into the National Council Department. So if we had given this money to the Education Department, and we talked about that, that was one of the things that we met with Chief and hit some of his cabinet members about, and Second Chief. And we said, if we give you this money, can you guys administer this grant for us? And they said, absolutely. But there were administrative costs, right? You have to hire somebody, and then they have to have salary, and they have to have fringe and all. Instead of having $125,000, then now we only have $50,000 to give away because you have to get that person a desk and a computer and a phone and all those things.
Right.
So we have very low administrative costs. So this program, every penny that is, it's been legislated, it's going straight to teachers, which I'm very, very proud of. So that's one of the cool things about this grant. But this grant is also renewable. The education department had that $200 or $250 grant, which it was really wonderful. And it went for, I think, reimbursing you for your certification for your teaching certificate. And there were a couple of things, but it was very limited. It was a very narrow scope of what it addressed. And our grant is very open-ended. If a teacher does need to help recoup some of those costs, really the legislation ties it to educational needs or educational activities, right? So anything that's going in your classroom, or if there's educational activities that maybe your district can't afford that you would want to do with your children, this could go to that, because that's what the legislation specifies that the money has to go to. So it doesn't have to necessarily be school supplies. I think one of the requests, if I remember right, whenever I was talking to Sammy, she said that a teacher had asked if they could use it for buying a computer program to teach in their classroom. I mean, I don't know why not. If you're going to be using it with the kids and it's going to help them, I don't see why not. But ultimately, it's up to the Q committee whether or not that gets approved.
Right.
So if anybody has any questions about, does this fit the legislation or does it not? I mean, apply. All they can do is say no.
Right.
One of the questions I was shocked that somebody asked was, well, what if a teacher doesn't need $500? Excuse me. But if somebody just wants to apply for $100 instead of $500, awesome, apply for it. And if it meets the criteria and the committee approves it, they'll send you a check for $100. So those are the kinds of things. It's just up to $500.
Gotcha.
If you have something you're trying to do and you want to use $500 of this money towards something that gets approved, awesome. They're just going to send you $500 though, instead of the full amount if it were to go over. So, like I said, we tried to structure it pretty open-ended because you probably know too, you've read enough legislation in your life and with your family's history. Um, it's really hard sometimes to be specific enough, but broad enough at the same time. And so that was one of the things that we were trying to stay away from, is cornering us to where we could only do these two or three things for teachers instead of just making it something. I want teachers to look at this and go, oh my gosh, thank goodness this exists so that my kids
Yeah.
will get this year, right? And so I'm hoping that's what it does.
Well, and as an outside observer to the process, that this is something that teachers, the higher up you go, but even more so for younger children, teachers spend a lot of money out of their own pocket to provide for supplies for their classroom and all these things. And that seems to be what you guys are trying to address by using some money that the National Council has set aside already to donate to organizations. You're just going to target those teachers and say, hey, if you're a Mvskoke teacher, we want the kids in your class to get as much stuff as they can get and come down and apply for this grant. So I think it's really an interesting thing that you don't see a lot of tribes or anybody doing, is giving money directly to those teachers that need those, outside of when the teacher may ask the parents, like if you have a kid in school, they'll sometimes say, hey, we need Kleenexes and we need this, you got to buy that extra stuff. And that's what you're doing. You're donating that stuff so that they can have the supplies they need for their class. And it's great to see some of that donations money from the National Council to go into those teachers' classrooms.
Yeah, because teachers work so hard just to do basic things in their classroom, right? I am very good friends with an amazing teacher that lives here in Sepulpa, and she'd actually left the profession for a few years because honestly, they just couldn't afford to live. She needed to go and
Mm-hmm.
make more money for a few years. Well, she's coming back. And she posted a video yesterday of this shelf that she scored and she was super proud of because she had to go dumpster diving, and she sanded it and she painted it, and it's going to go in her classroom. And I'm very proud of her. She's an amazing teacher, she's an amazing human. But I don't want our teachers diving in dumpsters.
Right.
I want our kids to have what they need. I want our teachers to have what they need. And, we all do what we do, but I thought, oh my goodness, this is where we are in Oklahoma, y'all. People are dumpster diving for things to go in their classrooms.
Yeah, yeah. Well, it's been a pleasure to have you on the program. If you guys have any questions, the legislation that establishes these grants a link to it is in the description of the video. To apply, you'll need to go to the National Council's website and get a hold of the National Council Secretary. Would that be a good?
So in the application, there is it's a special email. It's like National Council at MvskokeNation.com, but it's on the application.
Okay.
It's a generic,
Is that attached to the legislation?
it is.
Okay.
So it's in the requirements and restrictions. So when you go to the grant itself, there are a couple of different links. So one link is let's see, one link is the teacher requirements that kind of tells you like who qualifies, how you qualify. One is the application itself. And the last thing is an actual checklist where you can go through and say, do I have a copy of my citizenship card? Do I have a copy of my
Gotcha.
certificate and all of that kind of stuff? And the email address that all of that will go to is office of nc@mvskokenation.com. So it's a generic email that any of our staff can check. So Samaria Spalding is the one in our office that's going to be going to be handling these applications. But if she takes a day off or, whatever,
Mm-hmm.
anybody in the office can pull those applications up because it's a generic email address. So
Gotcha.
it'll specifically to that email address.
And guys, I'll check the link that I've embedded there in the description to see if it has the stuff, and because sometimes when you post these PDFs, the link gets disconnected. If the link in that PDF doesn't work, I'll just go and get it and put it in the description, the email link, so you guys can click that and apply. If you're watching this and you're like, oh, I can't find the link, after we get done with the stream, I'll go and try to fix all that stuff. So check back in if you can't figure out how to get there. We'll put it in there explicitly, say to apply, email here or get this application or something, kind of clear that up, because I know so sometimes when I post a link of a PDF of legislation, some of the links in it won't be connected. So, but go ahead,
One
Dodie.
wanted to just add to you really quickly, is, this is the first year that we've offered this grant. It is very much going to be a learning process. We've never had anything quite like this before as far as the National Council funding goes. And, we had a lot of discussions with a lot of different folks before we landed where we are with this. But if there is an overwhelming need that comes about because of this application process that we are not currently meeting, legislation is living and breathing. We can always go back in and amend that code. And a couple of the things that I saw, I think I explained the history of the funding and why it's only going to be available on the reservation. I had a questions from teachers off the reservation asking if they could apply for this. Unfortunately, no. It is for specifically Mvskoke citizens who are teachers. I think somebody else had asked why pre-K wasn't added. K through 12. I mean, some elementary schools don't have pre-K. We were trying to be as broad as we can, and K through 12 is required by law for students to attend. Pre-K is optional. Even if you have pre-K in your school system, they don't have to attend that. So we were trying to hit the kids that we knew were going to be there and the teachers knew were going to be there. But, if we just get this overwhelming response for pre-K, maybe we'll add it next year. I don't know what that looks like. Depends on the funding. And if we get overwhelmed, I mean, maybe we might have to decide which grades are applicable. I don't know. I mean, I'm hoping we don't have to put any more qualifiers on it, because again, we tried to keep it super simple and super basic and easy. But we'll see whenever we get the applications.
All right. Well, I look forward to seeing what comes out of it and seeing how many grants go out. If you're a teacher and you get the grant, hit us up. We'd love to do a story on it and follow along, see how the money goes and how everything works out. Dodie, thanks so much for joining us tonight, and thanks you guys for tuning in. There aren't any questions in the chat, so we are getting right there at 30 minutes, so it's about time to sign out. And we'll keep you guys updated in the future. And thanks for tuning in. Mado, Hadum, Chihichat, Lise.